The table was draped in ivory petals that shimmered in the afternoon light, soft and deliberate, like every other detail of the vineyard wedding. The young woman behind the table greeted each guest by name, smiling until she reached me. She didn't ask who I was, didn't check the list. She reached into a plain box and pulled out a small creased piece of paper. No ribbon, no gold trim. Just 2 printed words, limited access guest. I stared at it, not understanding at first, until I smelled the perfume and heard the whisper beside me. "That means there's no meal for you," Colette Langford said smoothly, pearls glinting under the sun as if she were sharing gossip instead of cruelty. Then she walked away, leaving me with the paper badge between my fingers and a silence that felt heavier than the warm air around us. I looked up, but no one else noticed. The woman behind the table had already turned to the next guest, handing out gold-trimmed envelopes with practiced ease. I tucked the badge into my purse like something shameful. The laughter of other guests drifted from the courtyard. Cameron stood under the floral arch, her veil catching the light, her bouquet glowing like something sacred. My daughter, my only child. I didn't wave. My shoes crunched against the gravel path as I walked toward the gift table, my steps slow and steady. I hadn't cried yet, not even when I realized what limited access really meant. I was still stuck in that familiar place between disbelief and restraint. I thought of the nights I'd worked double shifts at the hospital when Cameron was little, the years that had passed, without anyone clapping for the quiet sacrifices that kept her world intact. Cameron was 3 when Javier, my husband, was killed by a drunk driver just after dawn. I still remember the officer's voice breaking through the line, too calm for what he had to say. I didn't drop the phone. I didn't scream. I just kept pouring cereal for Cameron. She ate while I listened to my world split open. After that, grief became routine. Bills didn't stop. Rent didn't pause. I worked every shift I could, traded sleep for stability, laughter, for safety. I moved us into a 1-bedroom apartment where she had the room, and I slept on the fold-out couch beside a flickering space heater. For birthdays, I baked from scratch. For Christmas, I wrapped practical gifts, coats, notebooks, dolls from thrift shops. She never lacked. That was my promise. When she got into private school, I took weekend shifts to afford the uniform. When she got braces, I skipped my own doctor visits. I told everyone who asked that I didn't date because I didn't have time, but the truth was simpler. There wasn't space in me for anyone else. Everything I had, I gave to her. She was bright, imaginative, hungry for more than the life I could provide. And that made every sacrifice worth it. I used to think love, if given purely enough, could never be mistaken. But love, I've learned, can also be rewritten. After college, Cameron's calls came less often. When she did answer, her voice was brisk, distracted. "This week's crazy, Ma. Next one, promise." Next week never came. The last time we had brunch, she introduced me as her mother, a nurse, not the kind with a title, just the practical kind. The girl across the table smiled politely, then turned back to Cameron. I told myself it didn't matter, but that was the first time I felt it, the quiet editing of my life out of hers. When she got engaged, I thought maybe things would change. Colette Langford, her fiancé's mother, organized the dinner between families. I offered to host, but she insisted on an upscale restaurant. I remember watching Cameron laugh beside them, talking about her firm's campaigns like she'd been born into that world. When the bill came, no one reached for it. So I did. Now, standing at her wedding, I looked at the gift table covered in satin and gold-rimmed envelopes. My own card lay flat beneath the other's plain white, unadorned. I slid it from the stack and opened it. Inside was a check for $7,000, 9 months of extra shifts, skipped vacations, postponed car repairs. I'd marked it in the memo line for your next chapter, but now, holding it in my hands, it didn't feel like a gift. It felt like evidence of a woman who had confused devotion with invisibility. The laughter behind me grew louder. Cameron's veil caught the light again as she turned toward Colette. Their smiles matched. No one looked for me. I folded the check once then again and whispered, "You won't need this anymore." Then I slipped it back into my purse beside the paper badge and walked out. I didn't rush. My heels clicked softly against the stone path as the music swelled behind me. By the time Cameron called out, her voice cracked desperate. "Mom, wait!" But I didn't. The gravel shifted under my shoes, the vineyard lights faded behind me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. At home, the silence felt like a witness. I dropped my purse on the entry table and didn't unpack it. The paper badge was still inside, bent pressed against the envelope with the check. I showered until the water ran almost too hot to bear the steam filling the small bathroom until my reflection blurred. I didn't cry. I didn't even speak. I just stood there, letting the noise of the water drown out everything else. When I finally turned it off, the world felt too quiet, too still. I lay in bed and listened to the clock tick through the night. Around 11 p.m., my phone buzzed once then again after midnight. I didn't check it. I'd spent years mistaking silence for loneliness, but that night, it felt like peace. By morning, the sun slipped through the blinds in soft stripes. I brewed coffee and stood barefoot by the window. My phone lit up again. A text from Cameron. "We can't reserve the honeymoon suite without the check. The deposit's due today. Can you just let me know? No greeting, no apology, just logistics." I stared at the screen, then placed the phone face down on the table. Outside, a bird landed on the fence, its wings still fluttering. I made breakfast and ate slowly, savoring the quiet. Just after noon, another message arrived from an unknown number. "Hi, Maris. I hope this isn't overstepping, but I thought you should know. You were originally seated at the family table next to Cameron. Colette submitted a revised list 4 days before the wedding. She moved you. Cameron signed off on it." I saw the check mark. "I'm so sorry." The message ended with a name, Elena, the groom's sister-in-law. I remembered her from the dinner, polite, quiet, the only one who'd made eye contact with me that night. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee gone cold, phone still glowing. It wasn't the confirmation I wanted, but it was the one I'd expected. Cameron had seen it. She had known. Maybe not maliciously, maybe not even consciously, but she'd let it happen. She'd let me be erased, and that was enough. I looked at the envelope on the table. My name in one corner, hers in the memo line. The handwriting looked steady. Mine always was when I wrote for her. I realized then that I had never really given gifts. I had been giving permission. Permission to take, to assume, to forget. The phone rang again at 5 p.m. I didn't answer at first, but on the third ring, I let it connect. Cameron's voice came through smaller than I remembered. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. "We just needed to prioritize things." The list was full. Beatrice said I stopped her. "You saw it," I said. Silence, then a slow exhale. "I didn't think it mattered where you sat." The words landed like stones. It wasn't the exclusion that broke me. It was the casualness. The way she assumed I'd understand that I'd stay quiet, grateful, compliant. "I've always given," then I said softly. "My time, my savings, my seat apparently." She said my name, then her voice cracking, but I didn't let it pull me back. "If I ever give again," I said, "steady, now it won't be a gift. It'll come with terms in writing, signed and dated." Her breath caught, but I ended the call before she could reply. The silence that followed was final, not fragile. I stood there, phone still warm in my hand, and looked out at the darkening yard. The envelope sat on the counter, no longer a promise, just a piece of paper that meant nothing now. I turned off the kitchen light and went outside. The air was cool, the sky the color of slate. I sat on the porch arms around my knees, listening to the hum of the streetlights and the faint rustle of wind through the trees. Tomorrow, I decided I'd plant something. Not for her, not for forgiveness, but for me. The next morning, I pulled on gloves and stepped into the yard. The patch of soil by the fence had been bare for years, too shaded, too dry, forgotten like so many other corners of my life I'd promised to tend one day. The air was cool, faintly sweet with dew. I carried a small paper bag filled with tulip bulbs, purple ones, Cameron's favorite when she was little. She used to call them princess flowers, pointing them out in catalogs and gardens, begging me to plant some. I never did. There was always something more urgent, something more responsible to spend on. But as I knelt there, pressing each bulb into the loosened earth, I realized I wasn't planting them for her now. I was planting them for the version of myself who kept waiting to be seen. For the woman who stayed quiet at the table, who kept showing up with wrapped gifts and soft smiles, hoping to be thanked for sacrifices no one noticed. For every morning I didn't sleep every dinner, I skipped every weekend I traded for extra shifts. I pressed the last bulb into the soil and smoothed it over with the back of my hand. They'd bloom in spring, long after winter's wait. Maybe I wouldn't show them to anyone. Maybe I'd never take a picture. But I'd know they were there alive, reaching toward light without permission. Inside the envelope still sat where I'd left it. The badge from the wedding rested beside it, folded and creased like a relic from a past life. I didn't throw them away. I didn't tear them. I just let them stay proof, not of pain, but of clarity. That evening, I brewed tea and sat on the porch, watching the first hint of frost shimmer across the yard. For once, I wasn't waiting for a text or a call. I wasn't waiting to be chosen. The silence didn't ache anymore. It simply existed. My birthday came quietly midweek. I didn't tell anyone. By noon, the absence of calls confirmed what I already knew Cameron wouldn't remember. Not this year. I ordered takeout from the Thai place on the corner, extra spicy, the way I liked it, but never dared to before. I ate on the porch, the tulip beds still bare but full of promise beneath the soil. The quiet didn't feel hollow. It felt earned, like a room finally cleared of clutter. That night, I washed my plate, poured another cup of tea, and sat with the check one last time, not to send it, not to destroy it, just to see it for what it was. A symbol of how far I'd gone for someone who couldn't meet me halfway. I placed it back in the envelope, turned off the kitchen light, and let the stillness settle around me. The message came the next morning. Hi, Maris. We're moving forward with the honeymoon plans. Can we confirm your support? As if generosity were a faucet, I could be turned on again. As if nothing had happened. I read it once, then deleted it without replying. Outside, a pale green had started to push through the dirt, tiny tulip shoots, stubborn and sure. I watched them sway gently in the breeze, the early sun glinting off their leaves. I sat on the back step with my tea, the warmth seeping into my palms. The air smelled faintly of rain. The fence creaked softly, and the garden whispered in its quiet way that growth could be a kind of revenge. Not the angry kind, but the patient kind, the kind that happens quietly, when no one's watching, when you finally stopped trying to prove your worth. I used to leave the door cracked, always hoping, always waiting, always ready to forgive. But some doors don't need to be slammed. They just need to be locked from the inside. I finished my tea, stood, and walked back toward the house. The screen door clicked shut behind me, gentle, final, and mine. If this story touched you, share it. Somewhere, someone is still waiting for permission to stop begging for love that should have been freely given. Tell them they're allowed to close the door and start over.